Are tolls going to happen in 2020? With us now, Keith Phaneuf of the Connecticut Mirror, who has been studying and reporting on the big toll issue. And Keith, good to see you back here in the program.
Good to be here.
So a year ago, of course, they were talking about tolls for every vehicle, about 80 gantries across the state. That faded as the session went on and was pretty much dead by the end of the year. Now they're talking about tolls just for trucks. How many and where would they go?
Right now they're talking about 12 gantries. We're talking about just on major highways like 84, 95, 91, 395 in eastern Connecticut. And the gantries would be tied to specific bridges, areas where the infrastructure is aging. And we're also talking not about all trucks. Technically, we're saying Class 8 and above, so we're basically saying tractor trailers. It was a concerted effort to avoid mid-sized trucks and small businesses.
So a truck that might deliver milk or something like that, that's a big truck but not a tractor trailer, would be exempt.
Exactly. And you know, there are still easy passes for trucks as well. That can make a difference. I mean, if a truck doesn't have an easy pass, it could be anywhere from about $9.50 to $19. With an easy pass, it's like between $6 and $13, depending on the size or the class of the truck.
You know, critics are saying that once the gantries are up, it's pretty easy to just flip a switch and now charge everybody and turn them into car tolls eventually. Is that a legitimate fear?
Well, I think I would put it this way. Keep in mind, there's still the huge political obstacle that's like saying all you have to do is flip a switch. That switch would be take a political step that, as you just pointed out, over the last 12 months, the legislature peered over that abyss and pulled right back. There are talks about would there be an oversight board impaneled to set the rates. I could not imagine a legislature right now impaneling an oversight board to broaden the spectrum of vehicles that could be tolled.
What led to the decision by so many, particularly Democrats, to change their minds on tolls and go against them?
I think it might have been, in some cases, an assumption that more Democrats were on board to begin with. I'm sure there was some internal polling, but the fact of the matter is that was never really a campaign-tested message. If you remember, candidate Ned Lamont was saying, I'm only going to toll trucks. And in fairness, he was running against someone, Bob Stefanowski, who was saying, I'm going to take half the resources out of the state budget. I'm going to phase out the income tax. I mean, there were strong claims, to put it bluntly, on both sides of that debate. But I think there were a lot of legislators who'd never really come to grips with whether or not they're ready to impose tolls on cars.
What is the support for trucks-only tolls in the legislature right now, as you know it?
Okay. Right now, in both chambers, we have Democratic majorities. Right now in the House, the Speaker, Joe Arasimowicz, says he's very comfortable that they have the votes to pass it.
Truck only.
Truck only,
yeah.
Correct. The Senate President Pro Tem Marty Looney has said, and I have to try to remember how he carefully chose his words, that they have 18 conditional non-nos.
What does that mean exactly?
Yes, and I should tell people who are doing the math at home, there are 36 seats in the Senate.
Yeah.
So 18 is dead even. The Democrats have 22 of those seats. It means 4 of the Democratic Senate, there are no Republican votes to start, and 4 of the Democrats are reported to be no votes, which would leave you with an 18 all deadlock, or at least 18 people open to it. I've heard sources say there could be 1 or 2 more Democratic votes, but I think Senate Democrats would like this to go to an 18 all tie, because the tie-breaking vote would then be cast by the president of the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysiewicz. She would presumably support Governor Lamont's position. And then the Lamont administration, which probably already owns tolls, would own it ever so much more so.
Is this because it's an election year and they figure this is an easier argument to say, well, the governor pushed it through and his person
absolutely
cast that deciding vote?
Not to be blunt, but absolutely. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, people are looking for cover. They're talking about, could we put in bond covenants? Like if we're financing tolls, we'll have to have in that financing, we'll assign somebody to run the gantries, send out the bills. Maybe we could put in the contract with that person that some assurance that things could never be imposed on cars. Bond covenants are providing people with less assurance these days. A decade ago, we had bond covenants saying we'd never refinance our teacher pension plan until those bonds were paid off in the 2030s. We refinanced it this year.
Republicans are saying that they would like to use the rainy day fund to pay for transportation improvements. How feasible is that?
I mean, you could do it. I would almost say what they really are doing is use the rainy day fund to temporarily pay down pension debt. That would produce a savings, and then every year filter that savings into the transportation program. What strikes me about these plans is how, as much as they criticize each other, they're both similar in that they're very lean. We're spending, Dennis, about $1.6 billion a year on transportation construction. The plan that's out there is about an average of $1.9 billion a year. And none of it's over the $2 billion mark the DOT says. And if we start to chip away at this, if for some reason the tolls don't bring in as much, we're also supposed to send some sales tax money. If we don't do that, all of a sudden we're not that far above the status quo. And the Republican plan was about $1.8 billion a year.
What other spending issues do you think we'll be seeing in the session this year?
I think you're going to see a little bit of a fight continuing to grow over the state's credit card. Governor Lamont has his debt diet. It's an election year, as you pointed out, and if Democrats, especially if they vote for tolls in the next few weeks, are going to say, look, we need some community improvements in Democratic districts. Some would call it pork. That goes on the credit card. People are going to want soccer fields and streetlights and gazebos, and Governor Lamont doesn't want to borrow for that. There was some butting of heads over that. The governor is trying to keep the legislature's hands off the rainy day fund. We have a record-setting reserve that's equal to about 13% of annual spending. We've never had anything over 8%. There's $2.5 billion. We may add a little bit more to it. Legislators are having a tough time looking at that pot of money and trying to understand why they can't spend at least a little of it.
What if tolls should fail this year? If more Democrats look at the numbers in November and say, listen, I just can't support this because I may lose.
That's a really good point, and that could happen. I think once you get into the session on February 5th, tolls could turn into a pumpkin for a long time, because I'm not an economist, but we do know that the last recession ended in mid-2009, early 2010, however you call it. History would suggest we're much closer to our next downturn than our next surge. Once you're into a recession, state tax receipts will begin to pull back, pension costs will go up, and probably if it's any type of a good recession, well, that's an oxymoron, severe recession, you're going to have to raise taxes at some point coming out of it. Try doing tolls in the midst of that. If you don't do it now, you might not get another window for 3 or 4 or 5 years.
It's going to be a fascinating session. Keith Phaneuf from the Connecticut Mirror, some great reporting, along with Mark Pazniosik. Neokis. I know Paz.
You got it.
Why am I doing that?
I
We're
just
from the
say
same
Paz.
hometown. Paz, that's what I should do. Anyway, you guys have
you.
done some great work on that, so thanks for being on the program today. In a moment, a red-hot race in the middle of January. And we welcome your comments on social media. Find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter right now.